In November, Arnold Roth wrote an op-ed for JNS on what would have been his daughter Malki's 40th birthday. The headline was, "Why is U.S. Justice for its Victims of Terror Still Thwarted?" Malki was murdered together with 2 other Americans and 13 other people by a suicide bomber who had been led to the Sbarro pizzeria in Jerusalem on the 9th of October 2001 by a terrorist named Ahlam Tamimi, who today lives as a free citizen in Jordan despite a U.S. extradition order for her. Welcome to the JNS TV studio, Arnold Roth.
Thank you, Steve. Nice to be here.
Tell us a little bit about why the terrorist responsible for your daughter and 15 others' murder is still free.
That's a terrific question, and since I don't know the answer, we can end the interview at this moment. But the reality is that trying to change that status has been a preoccupation of mine since shortly after the Shalit deal in 2011, when this woman walked free along with over 1,000 individuals who were all convicted terrorists. She, unlike the others, was a Jordanian citizen and went straight to Jordan via a pit stop in Cairo, where she was embraced by the leadership of Hamas, for whom she worked and still does, and then on to Jordan, where she became a hero and a media personality by any measure. What's appalling in the story that preoccupies me and that started back in 2001 with the massacre at Sbarro is that there's no attention being paid to the horrifying reality that Tamimi is free, not only free, but a celebrity living a dream life in Jordan. And that has to change.
And you've spoken to American officials. What do they tell you? Is there any chance that under this second Trump administration, justice can be done?
There's always a chance. There's been a chance at every stage. It's hard to come up with an intelligent-sounding assessment of what the chances are. But what I can say is that, unlike your carefully framed question, what I do mostly is speak at U.S. officials, and very rarely with American officials. The exceptions pretty much prove the rule, which is there isn't too much interest in talking about this. Not because the case isn't important. Without a doubt, this woman is America's most wanted female fugitive. She has a $5 million State Department, people might be surprised to know, State Department prize on her head. She's an FBI most wanted. Often I ask people, how many of those do you think there are? How many FBI most wanted terrorists are there? And people will say 5,000, and the answer is at this point about 24. And she's one of them. And yet she's not only free, but she's a very big deal in Jordan. And something clearly is very wrong with that situation.
What is your best bet in terms of getting this done? I know you and your wife, your family, have not stopped and have never given up. What do you think is the best way to go?
The best way to go is also the best way it can go. And it involves only the United States. It doesn't involve Jordan or Israel or Australia or any other place we can think of. It's only about an act of will by the people who are in power in the United States to say to the Jordanians, who are utterly dependent on the largesse of the United States, of its taxpayers, says to them, 4:30. We want her at the airport at 4:30 today. That's all that needs to be done. There is a treaty between the United States and Jordan. There's no question that that treaty is valid and binding, even though Jordan declared right after the Shalit deal that she's not going to be released because the treaty is not valid. Well, it is, and no one believes the Jordanians. No one accepts it. Everybody sort of looks the other way and pretends not to hear. We know that for the Jordanians, it's important to have an alibi, and their alibi is there is no treaty. But there is. Of course there is. There's always been a treaty. The Jordanians have complied with the treaty on multiple in multiple cases. They choose not to hand this woman over. So the decision needs to be taken. It could be in the State Department, it could be in the National Security Council, but it really needs to be taken in the White House. And I won't be drawn, because I don't think it's anyone's interests to be drawn into saying, well, is this president better than another president? Is this president's second term better than this president's first term? This won't work. Anyone can and absolutely should respect American justice if they're in the political role of defending American justice, and they should certainly protect America's diplomatic interests, which are certainly damaged by allowing Jordan to get away with this.
Now, you and your family made Aliyah from the United States, but you're originally from Australia, and I couldn't help thinking of you after the recent terrorist attack in Bondi Beach. I know this is an unfair question, but how did it feel to have 16 people again killed in a terrorist attack in your home turf?
You're very tuned into the facts, Steve, and it makes the conversation a lot easier, I have to say. Yes, it's very confronting very confronting in every sense of the word, to see what's happened in Sydney, the massacre at Bondi Beach that was done in the name of Islam by the people who say it was done in the name of Islam. Very similar to what happened in the Sbarro pizzeria, where the woman acted for Hamas, is all about Islam and knows nothing about occupied territories or green lines. The Australian government, with whom I've had nothing but aggravation over the years — my daughter was in fact born in Australia, even though she had American citizenship and then in due course Israeli citizenship — the Australian government has, like most politicians, headed for the hills when I come. No one wants to confront the issue of saying to the Jordanians, whom everybody knows to be moderate and loves them and wants only good things on their heads, no one wants to say to them, what's the matter with you people? Take this butcher, this woman who's famous only because of the children she targeted for murder and then murdered them, put her on the plane, send her to the United States. So Australia doesn't do it. The Australian government over the last several years, and I'm trying not to sound political about this, has done awful things in looking away as an unquestionably rising tide of anti-Semitism, in very large measure driven by large numbers of Muslims who've made their home in Australia in the years after we left there. We actually made Aliyah from Australia. My wife is indeed an American. The Australian government has looked away, and all of a sudden it's been caught in a terrible situation. They've now turned this into an opportunity to change gun laws, as if it was the weakness in the gun laws that brought this father and son combination of people with massacre on their minds to the beach. But it clearly was not. The guns were obtainable under any conditions. Changing the gun laws won't change the reality that Jews can't march in the streets or even walk casually in the streets of Melbourne or Sydney or anywhere else without being harassed, attacked, offended, and worse. Watching all of that, I see very strong parallels, unfortunately, between the Australian situation and what the United States has brought upon itself, which is to pretend that there is no problem with Jordan and there is no problem with Islamist terrorism, and just allows this situation to go on by ignoring the Roths, I have to say, ignoring the Roths, just pretending we're not there, but ignoring the issue itself. That's a much more serious issue, ignoring it.
Just to go back a little bit to Malki, tell us a little bit about her and also the Malki Foundation that you established in her memory, and your situation today with your family living in Jerusalem.
It's a lot easier for me to talk about the murder than it is to talk about Malki. The loss of Malki, the fourth of our 7 children, middle child, first girl after 3 boys, was painful in ways that are hard to describe and continues to be. Malki was an exceptionally lovely young woman, only 15, never got to her 16th birthday, and was deeply devoted to people in need in general, and that sounds a little wishy-washy. But her youngest sister, we didn't know it originally, was born blind and brain damaged, and then got a lot more brain damage as a result of serious problems after she turned 1. And Malki was really a big part of the support system for her sister. And then found ways to take the lessons she had learned from dealing with her own sister into the workplace. In other words, school and playtime and friends. So when we were sitting in our house in the misery of the 7 days of mourning, and after many people, thousands of people who'd come through our home, had gone, I asked the kids to sit down with me. My wife was not in a good position to have a conversation, and said to everyone around me, kids, what are we going to do to cause Malki to be remembered? The outcome of that was we created, as you said, the Malki Foundation. It's now in its 25th year. It does wonderful things in a very low-profile way, all focused on the things that Malki excelled in. being empathetic, being supportive, and in particular being focused on children with special needs and their families. So it's a terrific comfort, but it's hard to talk about. But on the other hand, I want people to know about it. The organization in Hebrew is called Keren Malki. That's one word, kerenmalki.org. And the background is there, including Malki's very touching song, a song she composed and about which we knew absolutely nothing until her friend sang it to us when we were sitting in the morning house.
And I know that the Sbarro attack also led to the Bellsberg family setting up one family for victims of terror. Is that something that helps you get through each day? I mean, I wonder, where do you get the strength to keep fighting?
You've promised me that we can talk for 4 hours here, and it'll take me more than that. What I can say is that, at least in our case, most of the support and the resilience and the ability to cope has come from within the family. That's not to put down any of the generous efforts that are made by other organizations, and you mentioned One Family, and there are others. From our perspective, looking after each other has really been the key message. We now have another generation. We have, I don't want to name numbers, but we have several grandchildren who have Malki in their name, so that the reality of dealing with the loss is around us all the time, not in a sad way, in a very positive way. And that's the best thing I can say, that the vitality and the closeness of family life is the most important thing that we've needed to have, and thank God we've had, in order to get through. I should also say that in the campaign to try to get Ahlam Tamimi, the miserable savage in Jordan, brought to trial, she was charged, I didn't mention this, charged in 2013 in the United States, and those charges are still pending. That campaign is really my wife and me, and we've never, consciously, never wanted to impose the burden of this on our children or our grandchildren, and that is the way it really should be. But as a family, being together, that's really what gets us through.
There's a debate still raging in Israel about hostage releases and Israel releasing Palestinian prisoners. I know that you have very strong feelings on this issue, but while I was researching, I also came across the name of Abdallah Barghouti, who was the bomb maker in the Sbarro terror attack and also several other attacks, and he eventually got sentenced to the longest sentence Israel's ever imposed. But I noticed that he still gets a pension from the Palestinian Authority. And how is that possible?
How is it possible? It's possible because that is policy of the Palestinian Authority. Abdallah Barghouti is the living embodiment of how murdering people can turn you into a happy and larger-than-life figure. He's often confused with Marwan Barghouti, who is his clansman and who personally paid for, and who's also in prison, and is considered to be a tremendous moderate, so moderate that we would invite him to dinner, is what I keep hearing from people, and they want him free. Paid for the making of the exploding guitar case that a certain young Palestinian man, a religious zealot, carried into the Sbarro and made explode. He was the bomb. I should have said that earlier on. People often talk about a suicide bombing. There was no suicide. The young man carrying the bomb, wanted to kill people. Whether or not he lived was irrelevant to him. The same is true with Abdallah Barghouti. He's not about being guilty, confessing how bad he feels. He doesn't feel bad. He feels wonderful. And the Palestinian Authority and Palestinian Arab society in general see him as a hero. They see Marwan Barghouti as a hero. We have big problems with our neighbors.
Mm-hmm. And what is your message to our viewers when it comes to future negotiations and future hostage taking?
That's a gift. Thank you for providing it to me. First of all, we have an uncompromising Prime Minister who wrote the book in the 1990s on how you deal with the terrorists. And in that book, he wrote, and the words are spectacular, you never do deals with the terrorists. All you do when you do that is to enlarge their appetite for more. Now, that's Bibi Netanyahu. This is not a political statement, but it's simply beyond any dispute that Bibi wrote that book, which I call The Dummy's Guide to Dealing with Terrorists. He wrote it, and it was a big success. And then at the first opportunity in his career to follow his own advice. Well, he obviously did not do it. And that's why the Shalit deal produced the release of 1,027 killers, and among them Ahlam Tamimi. The only advice that I want to share on the basis of what I've just said is we should never do deals with terrorists. And yes, I understand that there's this argument and that argument and lots of passion in these issues. And let me say this clearly, one of the victims, one of the people being held hostage was one of my children, I'd be out there killing people, telling them they have to do a deal with the terrorists. But that's not what a prime minister can do. You can't pretend that doing deals like this have no consequences. They clearly do. The consequences were known in advance. The consequences were articulated brilliantly by Bibi Netanyahu in his book. We're paying the price today. October the 7th is a direct consequence of the Shalit deal of 2011.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the biblical principles that motivates you is tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shalt thou pursue. How can we get that justice in this case?
My answer here is going to be pretty clear. We're not going to get it by an act of will. We're going to get it by influencing people. And there are two constituencies that have not responded as they should, maybe three, and it's time that they did. The first is the media. Most of the media don't give any news coverage to this shocking situation where Jordan keeps this woman free. It's time that became a news story. I don't know why it's not. I mean, I can speculate as to the causes, but there's no good explanation. The second group is the US Congress. We've gone through 4 administrations since Tamimi ended up in Jordan, and we're still waiting to see an outcry on the part of American lawmakers to say this is outrageous. We should not be sending taxpayer money to Jordan, which is in the top 2 or 3 recipients of US foreign aid. There we've failed. And the third, which is the most painful by far, is America's Jewish leadership. Now, I'm not going to name names, but I'm in the business now of a very painful dialogue with some of the most high-profile American Jewish organizations, and my claims are not complicated. I'm not looking for them to do any acrobatics in a political sense. I want them to speak out clearly, consistently. I want them to be saying what needs to be said, that this is an affront to justice, it's an affront to the war against the terrorists, and bad decisions have been made, and it's time that they were reversed. Tamimi is the embodiment of bad policy. I don't mean Jordanian policy. I don't even mean Israeli policy. I mean American policy. America didn't invite this issue, but America was invited to address it, and at the government level, it's failed to address it comprehensively.
Do you see any connection between the terrorist attack in Australia and what's going on in the United States and rising anti-Semitism?
Oh, emphatically, I do. I would start by saying that what's missing in both cases is clarity and consistency. The Australian government needs to be clear, not just about gun laws, because that's not what the Bondi Beach catastrophe was about, but about anti-Semitism and about public bigotry and hatred with a propensity for murder in the background, which is no longer theoretical. We now know the propensity for murder is absolutely real, and the people who carried out those acts of murder are not a tiny handful, and certainly not a man and his son. In the United States, we have a similar kind of problem. Everyone in the Arab world is aware. That's an overstatement. Everyone in Jordan is certainly aware, and larger numbers of thought leaders and ordinary people in the Arab world are aware that Jordan has wrestled the United States to the ground by prevailing over the American will to see this prize celebrity Hamas hero handed over to the Americans. It's a victory which is recounted every day. I read Arabic social media every day. It's a big issue, even if it's not to the average American or to the average policy advisor to members of Congress. Clarity and consistency are absolutely essential. One of the ways in which America is demonstrating an absence of clarity and an absolute absence of consistency is in something that happened just in the last few days. The United States and Jordan, via a visit by the head of the Department of Homeland Security to Jordan, have announced that Jordan is now a member of a very elite group. It's like a frequent flyer group, and it's called the Global Entry Program. Jordan is being treated the way Switzerland and Australia and Germany and a handful of privileged countries are, being privileged to have its citizens able to make special application for a red carpet treatment at the point of entry into the United States. The details are not at all important. What's important here is that pursuing some kind of let's reward the Jordanians, everybody involved in this is pretending to forget, that Jordan, I think almost uniquely, is an American ally which has breached its cornerstone treaty, a treaty that was made in 1995 between Clinton and King Hussein II, who's the father of today's king. You can't forget these things. You can't pretend that they didn't exist. You cannot be you cannot exhibit a lack of clarity and a lack of consistency and then expect your citizens to open up in a round of applause. That, unfortunately, characterizes what's gone terribly wrong both in Australia, and I speak as a native Australian who has Australian citizenship, and the United States. I speak as the father of an American citizen who is enraged by the lack of responsiveness and the lack of pride that I'm experiencing at the hands of the American government. So there is something that unfortunately makes the timing of our conversation particularly poignant, and I hope that it's going to change. I don't see too much momentum towards the change, but if it doesn't come, it won't be for lack of trying on the part of my wife and me.
Your final message as we approach the end of this interview?
I want people to know about my daughter's life because she's not a cause. Losing a precious child is always going to be difficult for the parents. We're certainly consistent with that. But people who are watching, I hope, understand that the loss of a child is made immeasurably worse, immeasurably more painful when you see the person who did it dancing on Malki's grave, triumphant, a celebrity, and protected, in effect, protected by the government of a major US ally, which is Jordan, and indirectly by the government of the United States. All of that is terribly, terribly difficult. I'm not a unique speaker, and our case is not a unique case. But when we're dealing with people who engage in terrorism, we need a different approach. And the experience in Australia shows that if you get that wrong, the price can be sudden, come all over you, and be impossible to erase from the record.
Arnold Roth, thank you so much for joining us in the JNS TV studio. And we're with you in this battle.
Thank you very much.